Welcome to Sports Beat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Monday, February 6th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. It's our first show from Arizona, site of Super Bowl LVII between the Chiefs and Eagles, so of course we go into Philadelphia. Today's guest is former Chiefs offensive lineman Joe Valerio. He played in Kansas City from 1991 until 1995, and among his claims to fame, catching four touchdown passes. Valerio grew up in Philly, went to the University of Pennsylvania, and returned to the city of brotherly love after his playing days, so he closely follows the Eagles, as well as co-hosting the Bleav in Chiefs podcast with Jeff Fedotin. He once had a fantasy football team called the Kans-adelphia Chee-gals. On today's show, Joe walks us through his keys to the game. As you might expect, he spends plenty of time breaking down the offensive and defensive lines. We talk about how the Eagles' run-pass option, or RPO, can do damage to the Chiefs, and how, by following the blocking lead of his offensive lineman, Patrick Mahomes avoids the sack. After a break, you'll hear a short take from Royal shortstop Bobby Witt Jr. He spoke to the motivation he receives from Mahomes, a fellow Texan. Okay, let's get started. Joe, welcome to Sports Beat KC. It's great to have you on. Super Bowl week has arrived. How cool is this that it is the Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles?
Well, Blair, this is actually really cool for me. While, I have got my cool Arrowhead background on, I am actually dialing in from the city of brotherly love where I live and have made my home all my life, other than my 6 years in Kansas City. So this is a very interesting Super Bowl. At one point, Blair, I had a fantasy football team that I named them the Kans-adelphia Chee-gals. So this is almost like all of those fantasy football dreams coming true for me because, obviously, like anybody who's a lifelong Kansas City Chiefs fan, I grew up in Philadelphia and I was an Eagles fan. So, it's a team that I've followed my whole life. And then you throw in my time in Kansas City and the wonderful opportunity from the Hunt family and Carl Peterson and Marty Schottenheimer that I received, and the incredible time that my wife and I spent being welcomed into the Kansas City family. I'm so happy for this organization and the success they've had over these years.
Yeah, for sure. To continue the Philadelphia bona fides here, you went to the University of Pennsylvania, played for the Penn Quakers, following our own Vahe Gregorian into the program. Of course, Vahe, a walk-on wide receiver, Joe, an all-Ivy offensive lineman, and the second-round pick for the Chiefs in the 91 draft. I Bleav you were tucked between, was it Harvey Williams and Tim Barnett?
And Tim Barnett, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So that was it was amazing, right? I mean, I think about I'll never forget my conversation with Carl Peterson. To keep a very long story short, I had done an internship at a local financial services firm here in the Philadelphia area right before my senior year in college. And it turned out that I was working for one of Carl Peterson's best friends. And I didn't even know it at the time. And, when I met Mr. Peterson and Marty and Howard Mudd at the Combine, they basically said, well, Joe, just to let you know, the way that you handled yourself at that internship is why we're going to draft you next month in the draft. And I was like taken aback, and he said the way that you acted during that internship is you showed us that you can do the right thing when no one's watching. And I was just completely aghast that lesson I learned that early on in my life, that you got to always work hard at no matter what you're doing. Because he later said, Joe, a lot of guys at the Combine can run and pass and catch and throw and tackle and do all those things. He said, but the Hunt family wants people in the locker room they can trust. And I was just like, wow, that was pretty amazing story, and kind of brought me back to my Penn roots and also to my Chiefs roots, and kind of pulled it all together at the draft.
That's very cool. And it got you in the end zone a few times too. They trusted you in the end zone.
Exactly. A lot of trust there. I'll tell you, Joe Montana, when we first put that play in, he was amazing, because when we got in the huddle, listen, I was only maybe several hundred touchdowns short of Jerry Rice, but Joe actually called the play in the huddle like I was Jerry Rice. Like he he never really made a big deal of it. And that actually gave me even more confidence, right? He's like, oh, he just trusts me to do this. I'm just another receiver and we're running another play, even though they always seem to be big games, right? With Joe, it was the Raiders, it was the 49ers matchup with him and Steve Young. It was the Monday night Elway shootout, but Joe just called those plays like literally like I was Jerry Rice. He never made a big thing of it and, asked if I was okay and if I was ready to get the ball, or looked me up and down to make sure I was, in good shape or something. And, that kind of confidence that people have in you, going back to the sort of the earlier story about the Chiefs and Carl Peterson and Marty, it does help you bring a different kind of confidence to the field for sure.
Yeah. Okay, Joe, I wanted to get your perspective on both teams because you follow them both very closely. Let's start with the Eagles, though. So the Eagles make the playoffs last season, and kind of a last week thing, as I recall. They won their way into the playoffs and went down to Tampa Bay and lost to Tom Brady's team. But I wasn't sure what to think about the Eagles coming off of that season. But then they went out and made some terrific acquisitions. Really upgraded the roster. And look, it was already a good roster, but it went from a kind of a good to a terrific roster with Hassan Reddick and AJ Brown and James Bradbury, and just some really nice upgrades for them that took them from I think I want to say they were either 9 or 8 and 10 and 7 that year to 14 and 3 in the regular season, and only that because of the injury to the quarterback. So what have you seen from the Eagles? Where have they've upgraded the roster, but where are they better on the field than they have been in the past?
Well, receiver, I think they built some things around Jalen Hurts so that he could, really execute the run pass option most effectively. And I think that's really where they really made those upgrades. Not that they already had Devonta Smith, they already had Quez Watkins, but they've developed, Dallas Goedert into, sort of what I would call a mini Travis Kelce, somebody who plays that style, more receiver than he is tight end. And then of course the AJ Brown pickup was huge. That really, I think, gave them the receiver that they needed to double team and open other things up. And the receiver that could hold linebackers and hold strong safeties so that it could make the RPO that much more effective. And then Jalen just did a great job of developing his style around the RPO. They've got, I think, along with the Chiefs, they're the two best offensive lines in the NFL for sure. And I'm not saying that just being biased both sides of the ball or being biased towards offensive lines and offensive linemen, but I think they have absolutely the two best offensive lines, tackle to tackle. They're aggressive. They have a passion for protecting the quarterback. And that's what I think the Eagles really built around. They built around how can we make this offensive line most effective. And, Miles Sanders and Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell are, they're, no, with no offense to them at all, much like the Chiefs running backs, they're B plus players, right? There's no Earl Campbells or Walter Paytons or, Priest Holmes or Jamal Charles is back there for either team. But both teams make a huge, they have a great way of using effectively their running backs, especially the way the Eagles use it in the RPO. If you watch that San Francisco game, they gashed some holes for those Eagles running backs that any running back you could have driven a truck through some of those holes. And it's because of, the ability to hold linebackers and hold strong safeties who are filling. And I think that's probably what the Chiefs have to work on the most this week.
Okay, and speaking of the Chiefs, you and Jeff Fedotin with the terrific Bleav in Chiefs podcast that you do every week. Great listen. We'll link to it on our story about this podcast. So you pay close attention to the Chiefs. You know them as well as anybody. I really like your observation about the offensive line. I think that flies under the radar a little bit. That offensive line has had a very nice year. They've managed to stay healthy most of the year. There have been some years like the Super Bowl lost year to the Tampa Bay Bucks where, injuries really hurt them in that season. But you're right. Staying healthy has really helped them. The middle three have just been fantastic. Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith and, of course, Joe Thuney. And they're actually, and not, I shouldn't say actually, but they're getting good tackle play from Orlando Brown Jr. and Andrew Wiley. So let's start there with them. What have you seen from the Chiefs' offensive line? What's made them effective this year?
Well, they're maulers, and especially on the inside, right? When you watch the way that Joe, Creed, and Trey just attack those two defensive tackles and the middle linebacker who's trying to fill, they just make a mess of it up there for defensive fronts, and they really allow that push, and allows us to really, you know, have that, extra yard or two that you need, because it's very rare are you breaking these 8-9 yard runs in the NFL these days with the athletic ability of these linebackers and defensive players. But they're definitely have that edge where they're always looking for the extra yard or two, and I think Isaiah Pacheco adds to that myth, that he runs like he hates the ground, and he makes it, and it all kind of fits together, Blair. It's just all that get after it attitude in the run game. Again, not having a Christian Okoye or, a Priest Holmes or Jamal Charles type, again, taking nothing away from Isaiah or Jarek or any of the running backs that the Eagles have in their stable. It just, they don't, they've got to earn every yard that they can. And I think that's what this offensive line does. They earn it. Nothing's given to them by having a running back like a Derrick Henry who's going to get that extra 2 or 3 yards just by being who they are. And I think that's, very, very important up front. And they have a passion for protecting Patrick. And they're getting a lot better understanding where he is or where he's going to be or where he wants to go. And, Patrick has an uncanny ability of finding the pocket within the pocket. And they're getting used to that, right? They're getting used to staying on their blocks, just figuring out and using the defensive lineman's body against themselves. So, when you're pass blocking, you're not only, you have to know where the quarterback is so you can set your feet, but once you start to feel things moving, you've got to know how that defensive player is reacting. And if they feel them going slightly to the inside, they kind of know, oh, I better take this defensive lineman that direction. They don't try to fight it and keep them from going that direction. Once the defensive lineman starts going to their left, then they just take them to the left. And then Patrick finds that pocket within the pocket. It's a skill. I mean, it is not easy, because your first thought when you're pass blocking and you feel like if you think the quarterback is going to be lined up 6 or 7 yards behind you, right, in a standard Dan Marino, John Elway drop back passing game, like you kind of like try to position yourself. So, I can't let them get, but I have to stay between me and the quarter. I have to keep myself between the defensive player and the quarterback. But in this offense, they just take the defensive lineman where they want them to go. And once they sense them going somewhere, they take them. Patrick steps up. He finds the pocket within the pocket, gives that extra second for his receivers to get open, and boom, they make it happen. So that's the magic of how it all happens. And you just got to rep it. And, you kind of said it in there, Blair, it really comes down to chemistry and staying together and playing together. And that's why it was such a disaster in that one Super Bowl, when you didn't have that chemistry.
Right. And look, Mahomes sacks are down this year, or sacks are down for the Chiefs, but they're playing an Eagles team that does nothing but get to the quarterback. What is it, 70 sacks or some ridiculous number from the Eagles defensive line. So certainly put some pressure on the Chiefs offensive line. What a big task they're going to have on Sunday.
Yeah, I think this game comes down to two things. Obviously, of course, three things. I'm always going to say that it's the offensive line, right? Because the games are won up front, and how those two units on both sides of the ball perform to protect their quarterback and open holes and get movement is going to be critical, right? That's a given. That's table stakes. But for me, I think what's the next biggest thing is going to be how the Eagles defense reacts to playing against the Patrick Mahomes, and how the Chiefs defense reacts against playing against the Jalen Hurts. And these are the reasons why. The Eagles haven't really seen anybody like Patrick Mahomes this year. They really haven't. Let's be truthful. They have not played against a playmaker like him, or an offense that is as complicated, complex, and as, I keep using this word, magical as the Chiefs offense. They just haven't. And that's the honesty that comes with it. On the other side of the ball, the Chiefs haven't seen anything like this, right? I mean, the Chiefs haven't seen a Jalen Hurts. Yeah, they've played against some fantastic footwork and sort of happy feet quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, to a certain degree, whenever they get to play the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, and even Derek Carr and Justin Herbert, right? They're fantastic footwork quarterbacks that are not in your traditional John Elway, Dan Marino style. But the Chiefs have not seen the RPO, even though they've seen some very mobile quarterbacks, and it's a different animal. I coached high school football for 11 years, and we used to run the triple option, and I know what a fit that used to give teams, because if you're not disciplined and you haven't practiced it, it's really hard to defend, because you get so it's not that you get undisciplined, but you're trying to make a play in a split second, and all it takes is one pull of the ball or one decision by the quarterback, and you're caught flat-footed. And that's what I think the Eagles were able to do to the 49ers in some of those big gashing runs. And my hat's off to Steve Spagnuolo, and they're going to have to put together some fantastic, what I call scout cards, Bleav. Like, here's something a lot of listeners and fans don't realize is during the week, when you're playing a team, you have, we used to call, now I'm sure they do them on iPads, but when we played, we did scout cards, right? And they were on 3-ring binder, and you had an offensive assistant that would draw up the plays, right? They would draw up the plays of the Eagles, right? So on this play, this is where they go. This is the blocking scheme. And then you give a number 1 jersey for Jalen Hurts to, your most mobile quarterback. And, you give Antonio Brown jersey to, your biggest receiver. And you say, okay, be the Eagles. The Chiefs are going to have their work cut out for them trying to emulate this RPO thing, because it's dangerous. And I feel like if the Chiefs don't get that right and give the Chiefs defense like good muscle memory to stop this RPO, because it's more than just watching film and saying, oh, when he pulls the ball, this is what you need to feel, those things like on the field. Like, you need to feel what it's like to be not blocked and to be optioned by somebody. And you need to be at the linebacker position and hold your ground to wait to see what Jalen does, and then drop in your pass protection, knowing that or your pass coverage, knowing that he's not running. They need that. So whoever's drawing up those cards and whoever's wearing those jerseys of Antonio Brown and Miles Sanders and Jalen Hurts especially, make sure you're acting like those guys. Give the defense a look. That's what our coaches always say. Give the defense a look. And that's important. And that's something people don't realize, that all week that preparation is going to be happening.
So big responsibility for defensive ends in the RPO, right? I mean, they're the ones that's kind of the first line, and so linebackers and safeties too, but defensive ends have really got to be disciplined in against the RPO.
Definitely, because you don't, like you said, you don't want to get caught flat-footed. You want to make the right read. If he's coming at you and he decides to keep it, you want to make sure you're disciplined. But if he decides to pull up and if it draws the linebackers up too far and he just pulls out and throws that pass, it could be a long day for the intermediate passing game, because that's generally where the RPO happens.
Right. And we're all interested, just as in Kansas City, in Mahomes' ankle, hurts his shoulder, and see how that might affect him. I think for both quarterbacks in this game, they're going to go at it 100%. We're not going to see the effects of the injuries that they've been dealing with. But I do think that the shoulder injury has affected Hurts in the RPO in some games, when he came back, and favored that shoulder a little bit, going down when he was taking hits earlier. And we'll see. Like I said, the Eagles have rolled through their 2 playoff opponents. I don't think that'll be the case on Sunday, but Hurts has not had to, I don't think he's had to confront a defense quite like, listen, the 49ers defense is excellent, right? But that game got out of hand early. And anyway, the hurt shoulder, I think, is something to kind of keep an eye on early in this game. So,
oh, definitely. If you see him skirting to the outside like he did against San Francisco, you know that he's not feeling it, because he likes to run that. He likes to run that RPO off tackle and get up there and get those 6, 7, 8 yards a carry, which can be devastating, right? Because then you don't know what's happening. But a lot of times against the 49ers, he was skirting to his right so he could slide, get out of bounds, and not take a big hit on that right shoulder. So, hey, listen, it's the last game of the year. Maybe he throws caution to the wind and says, I want to do it all, coach. I want all the plays in. And then, the Chiefs defense will have to adjust.
Exactly. Okay. So, Joe, you coming out here? You're going to watch the game from Phoenix? You're going to stay in Philly?
Going to stay in Philly. We're going to have cheesesteaks and hoagies on one side of the, of the basement TV viewing area. And then we'll have Kansas City bar. There's a great Big Bad Wolf barbecue here in Philadelphia area. Does a great Kansas City style barbecue. And so we'll have barbecue on one side. We'll have the cheesesteaks and hoagies on the other side, kind of going right down the middle of Broadway there for, for all of those are going to be watching the game at our house. But it's going to be fun, Blair. And I tell you, the one thing I just love about both of these organizations is from the top, when it starts with the Hunt family and the Laurie family and how much respect they have for other teams. The Chiefs and Eagles are usually organization or fan bases that don't really start the trouble. And I learned that very early on in my time in Kansas City and how much respect they had for every team that came into Arrowhead. And I think the Eagles fans are the same way, maybe a little grittier, having that East Coast, not Midwestern, the geographic disparities between the two cities. But for the most part, these fan bases are very respectful of teams as long as you don't poke them, right? Like the way that the Bengals poked the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs fans never would have started all that shenanigans, but you know what? You get poked and, you're going to respond. And I think the Eagles fans, for the most part, are the same way. And you throw in the Kelce brothers drama that's going on right now. I think it's going to be, I'm actually looking forward to a non-drama filled week of preparation where two good teams are going to put their best foot forward, put their best game plan on, and go out and play a really competitive Super Bowl, because no one's going to be getting caught up in this, that, and the other thing, social media. I'm sure something's going to leak out somewhere. It's inevitable with social media, but for the most part, I think this is going to be a really fun week of preparation where people are going to be talking, just like you and I are talking about, the X's and O's, the Jimmies and Joes, as we used to say, that are going to be out on the field and what's going to happen during the game, and not all the shenanigans that happens before a game.
Yeah, and one of course, one sidebar, of course, is Big Charlie Saloon. Maybe I understand you've got a presence there, or there's a photograph in Big Charlie's of your family, or what? Tell me about that.
I mean, just from being, my dad, I was born not too far from Big Charlie's, in the Queen Village section of South Philadelphia, and my dad grew up and spent most of his adult life, not very far from Big Charlie. So it was my dad's haunt whenever he was in town in Philadelphia for a Chiefs game. And that's where he would go when he wasn't out in Kansas City or attending some family function or whatever to watch a game. But he was always at Big Charlie's. They'd give him a seat of honor. Any family member of a Chief always gets a little seat of honor there and in the bar. And it's just a great, and it's a lifelong thing. I mean, they've loved the Chiefs through the bad times and the good times. They are not a bandwagon like organization or sports bar fandom, that they have there. It did not start with this whole AFC championship run. And it didn't even start with the Joe Montana, Derek Thomas, Christian Okoye upward rise of the Kansas City organization. They go all the way back to the Len Dawson and the lean years, 70s and 80s, where, they still stuck by the Chiefs. So that's why I think they're such a beloved organization. And I think that's why the fans in Philadelphia love them so much, even the Eagles fans, because they've always been with the Chiefs. They're not a bandwagon group. And they're a really special group of fans that, and they used to come out and spend time with me at our radio show that we used to host post game back in the 90s, and we'd always get them up there and hang out with us. And they're just awesome people. And they love Philadelphia too. They love the Eagles too. The front of the bar is more of an Eagles bar, and the back of the bar is Chiefs. It just happens to be this year, my old fantasy football team of the Kans-adelphia Chee-gals is playing. So I had a fantasy football team once with a bunch of guys at work, and I called them the Kans-adelphia Chee-gals. So it's like my fantasy football dreams are coming true.
All right. Great stuff, Joe. Really appreciate you spending some time with us, and enjoy the week. Enjoy the game on Sunday. How could you not? Should be a great one. Just like the previous Eagles Super Bowl 5 years ago, and then one of the Chiefs' 2 Super Bowls, the one against the 49ers, were terrific games. So I trust Sundays will be as well.
I think so too. These are very equally matched teams. Like I said, the pressure is going to fall on the defense, how they adjust to Patrick and Jalen. I think those are really the two keys, because otherwise they're all very equal, at least very similar, I should say, in many respects. So those are the two differentiating factors, I think, that are going to be the fun thing to watch once that coin is flipped and the kickoff starts.
Good stuff, Joe. Thank you so much.
You got it, Blair.
Hey, this is Blair. There are several ways to access the Star Sports section. Let me tell you about a couple of them. There is Sports Pass. For $12.99 a month, you get unlimited digital access to all of the Star Sports content, including beat writing, columns, features, pretty much everything we write. The deal renews monthly until you tell us to cancel. For $159.99 a year, you get everything the Star has to offer digitally, including sports and the e-edition. Go to kansascity.com and drop down to the bottom of the page where it says Start a Subscription for more information. Your support has never been more important. As always, thanks for reading and listening. We spoke to Bobby Witt Jr. on Saturday during the Royals rally at Kauffman Stadium, and we couldn't let the opportunity pass without asking him about his friendship with Patrick Mahomes. Remember, Witt was a drum honoree at a Chiefs game this season, and he shares his observations of the Chiefs quarterback. You know, at least some kind of relationship with Patrick Mahomes. Tell us about that and just emotional investment in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's motivation for sure. Just seeing what he's doing, going to some games, and just all the work he puts in. I kind of see it from behind, just all the work he puts in the offseason, all the work he puts in during the season. And all that energy he brings, it's all real. It's all like just being down there on the sidelines, seeing him talk to his wife before the game, like, let's go, we're doing this, like it's showtime. It's just so cool to watch. Like, none of that stuff's fake. It's who he is. He's high energy. He just brings it all to the table, and it shows in what he's doing. So I definitely think that's motivation, and it made me become a Chiefs fan the past few years, just because of what the team has done, what those guys do over there, and just how great a team that culture is as a team, what Coach Reed brings to it, and just everything. So it's a lot of fun to watch, and looking forward to Sunday.
You have tickets? One more.
Not yet, no. So we'll see. Hopefully, yeah. So we'll hopefully get out there. I'll be out in Arizona anyway. So
Are you still working out with Bobby?
He's out here. So
yeah. So you're doing APAC down there though. Okay. Did you ever cross paths with Patrick in that setting?
Just with off seasons being different, and they're always deep in the postseason, so we never really see him up there.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to George Howard for producing today's show, and to our SportsBeat KC staff of Jeff Rosen, Scott Chasen, Monty Davis, and Randy Mason. Okay, we're on the ground in Arizona and bringing you complete coverage of Super Bowl 57 all week. Beat writers Herbie Teope and Jesse Newell, along with columnists Vahe Gregorian and Sam McDowell, have you covered, along with the entire Star staff. Everybody's covering the Super Bowl this week. So check it out in the print editions of the Kansas City Star, the website, kansascity.com, and my favorite source, the Morning Sports Edition. It was 35 pages today of Super Bowl, Pro Bowl, NBA, NHL, college basketball coverage, including a preview of the Kansas-Texas game tonight. So much more. Go to liveedition.kansascity.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.